Hi there, Johnny the Queer POTUS here. Just recently, President Joe Biden marked his first 100 days in office, and there's been all kinds of analyses in the news. How much did he get done in his first 100 days? How does his first 100 days compare to other presidents? It made me think, hey, what's this 100 days thing about anyway? So in this video, I'll talk about the origin of the first 100 days. As always, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and become a supporter on Patreon. Links in the description below. Okay, let's get started. If you are alive and watching this video right now, with a possible few exceptions for my senior viewers out there, your whole life, presidents have been graded on their first 100 days in office. The standard has been in use for almost 100 years. Each new administration uses its first 100 days to show it plans to hit the ground running. Presidents generally strive to outdo their predecessors in executive orders and, more importantly, legislative victories. In President Biden's first 100 days, he's outdone Presidents Trump and Obama in executive orders, but passed only 11 pieces of legislation, the most notable of which is the $1.9 trillion COVID Relief Act. Political analysts have nonetheless largely given Biden high marks due to the drop in unemployment, rise in the stock market, and successful distribution of vaccines. This combination of how much did you do and how well is the country positioned economically has characterized the 100 days standard since its first appearance in 1933, during Franklin Roosevelt's first term in office. Franklin Roosevelt took office in the midst of the Great Depression, the most economically crippling period in U.S. history. For 4 years, the country suffered record unemployment, and millions of people lost their life savings. The Hoover administration had attempted to meet the crisis while simultaneously preserving an older vision of the presidency, one where the federal government was not used, or was at least sparingly used, to intervene during a market crisis. Roosevelt abandoned this vision of a hands-off executive branch and said as much in his first inaugural address, where he urged the Congress to take strong action and promised to go beyond his normal authority as president should Congress remain passive.
In the event that the national emergency is still critical, I shall not evade the clear course of duty that will then confront me. I shall ask the Congress for the one remaining instrument to meet the crisis: broad executive power to wage a war against the emergency as great as the power that would be given to me if we were in fact invaded by a foreign foe.
In the weeks before Roosevelt took office, the economy took a turn for the even worse, and Roosevelt attempted to calm fears with a now famous phrase.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
On his first day in office, Roosevelt called a special session of Congress to address the bank crisis. Since the Depression began, trust in banks had plummeted, and people were withdrawing their money, preferring to hoard cash under the mattress or exchange it for gold. Over 10,000 banks had crashed since the Depression started, so the new president immediately declared a bank holiday to stop the outgoing flow of money and give the banks time to catch their breath. In a matter of hours, on March 9th, Congress passed the Emergency Banking Relief Act. The act gave the banks more flexibility to deal with the currency shortage and authorized the printing of more money backed by U.S. government bonds. It also gave executive agencies like the Federal Reserve and the president himself more leverage to tinker with the economy. As FDR had said during the campaign,
"The country needs and demands bold, persistent experimentation. It is common sense to take a method and try it. If it fails, admit it frankly and try another. But above all, try something."
Roosevelt's early grasp of public communication would be key to his program of action during his first 100 days. On March 12th, Roosevelt took to the radio, a means of communication which had yet to be fully exploited by presidents, to explain in plain terms his administration's policies.
What then happened during the last few days of February and the first few days of March? Because of undermined confidence on the part of the public, there was a general rush by a large portion of our population to turn bank deposits into currency or gold. A rush so great that the soundest banks couldn't get enough currency to meet the demand. The reason for this was that on the spur of the moment, it was of course impossible to sell perfectly sound assets of a bank and convert them into cash except at panic prices far below their real value.
The Emergency Banking Relief Act would be the first of 76 pieces of legislation passed during Roosevelt's first few months in office, still a record. His programs focused on stabilizing the economy, providing relief to industry and farmers, and reforming the banking system to prevent future crashes. Many of these acts created new agencies, bureaus, and civilian task forces to mobilize the public as if it were going to war, and eventually it would go to war. Conservatives today would likely look at FDR's first 100 days as government gone mad. But Roosevelt also signed an act to maintain the credit of the United States, which slashed the federal budget and cut federal pay by 15%, including his own presidential salary. Roosevelt's emphasis on relief for the failing banks and industries led to criticism from the left, criticisms familiar to presidents like Biden, Obama, and Clinton, who also took power during economic crisis periods. Why are you bailing out the banks when people are starving? It's a good question. As billions of dollars returned to the banks and confidence in the stock market rose, the political class was praising Roosevelt for saving capitalism through his active government approach. Nevertheless, although Roosevelt came in with a bang, the Depression dragged on for many more years. In June of 1933, after Congress had adjourned, FDR left Washington for his summer vacation. Later in that same summer, during another one of his fireside chats, Roosevelt reflected on the country's progress, coining a term that would come to define presidential success.
I think we all wanted the opportunity of a little quiet thought to examine and assimilate in a mental picture the crowding events of the 100 days which have been devoted to the starting of the wheels of the New Deal.
And so was born the idea of the first 100 days. Since FDR, this standard has been applied to every U.S. president. Presidents are graded on the amount of work they are able to get done and how well the country is doing, usually based on the state of the economy. It is an imperfect measure, of course. Just because a president gets something done doesn't mean it's good for the country. And just because the economy is doing well doesn't mean that it was the president's policy that made it so. Most of the laws FDR passed were proposed long before Roosevelt took office, including the Banking Relief Act, which had been crafted by President Hoover. It was the unprecedented circumstances of the Depression and the clear signals that Roosevelt's would be an administration of action which led to this result. Presidents come into office under different circumstances, sometimes in the midst of a crisis, other times in relatively peaceful periods. Ronald Reagan's first 100 days contained all the drama only a Hollywood actor could bring to Washington, including the dramatic release of American hostages in Iran and a harrowing assassination attempt that boosted Reagan's popularity. President Ford's first 100 days included the pardon of disgraced President Richard Nixon, an act widely praised in retrospect, but extremely unpopular at the time. President Biden's first 100 days has earned him comparisons to Franklin Roosevelt, but in terms of laws passed, he's far behind FDR. In fact, with 11 laws passed, he's even behind President Trump, who passed 28 laws by this point. Biden has surpassed Trump in executive actions, though, by a factor of 9, many of them reversals of Trump's executive orders. But neither president comes close to FDR, Truman, or even President Clinton, for that matter. You often hear people complain about overuse of executive action, but the number has actually gone down significantly compared to FDR's time. Biden has brought that number back up a bit, but he's still a long way away from FDR level. Another place where I find the Biden-FDR comparison falls short is in terms of public communication. Biden has been a comparatively absent president in the first 100 days of his administration, rarely giving press conferences, and delivering only one joint message to Congress, which lasted only 65 minutes. In terms of mastering a new medium of communication, President Trump comes out as closer to FDR, with his use of Twitter to communicate his policies directly to the public. Since January 20th, Biden has posted around 500 tweets. President Trump had over 26,000 by this point. That's 18 tweets a day. Of course, context is key. A lot of people voted for Biden because of Trump's overbearing dominance of the news cycle and wanted a break from hearing the president's opinions all day, every day. When FDR took office, his recent predecessors had taken a largely hands-off approach to public communication. FDR's regular presence in America's living rooms through radio was a welcome change in a time of crisis. Whether Biden will be another FDR is difficult to say. The fact that Biden has already spent $2 trillion on his relief package and plans to spend trillions more on infrastructure puts him in the FDR zone. The lack of austerity rhetoric, i.e., we need to cut government spending, working families need to tighten their belts, etc., is an also welcome change with distinct Rooseveltian overtones. But Biden also has a much more split Congress than FDR. Partisan divides are deeper than ever before. His more reserved approach to public communication will make it harder for him to use the bully pulpit of the presidency to advance his policies. And he's taken significantly fewer actions as president than FDR had by this point. But again, the first 100 days was FDR's standard, and it's not always useful to apply it to every president. It doesn't mean the 100 days standard is completely BS, though. For those wishing to gain a sense of where a president plans to take the country over the course of their term, the first 100 days can serve as a strong indicator. So far, President Biden has signaled a desire for major reform, and hopes are high, especially among progressives.
The Biden administration and President Biden has definitely exceeded expectations that progressives had.
But whether Biden has set himself up to enact the sweeping changes he promised, whether he's taken strong enough action in his first 100 days and set the tone for a period of reform, or whether he has fallen short, will become more apparent in the months and years to come. We'll just have to wait and see. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. I know this was a short one, but I couldn't let Biden's 100 days go by without providing some historical context for the situation. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and become a supporter on patreon.com. It really helps me. Some fun facts about FDR before we go. He was the first president to fly in an airplane. He married his fifth cousin, Eleanor. He was a law school dropout, and he was also a lifelong philatelist. Does anybody know what a philatelist is? Anybody? Any guesses? Huh? It's someone who collects stamps. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week.